Actually, I'll have to change my case because Raghav did this one because mine was a long.
Oh my God, I steal the thunder.
Mine was, yes.
Thunder.
So this one's from a middle-aged to older patient, had a indeterminate lesion that was positive on PET, non-diagnostic biopsy, cut into it on gross examination and saw what you can see, probably guess was a very necrotic looking mass.
Yeah.
Was worried about infectious etiology, so everyone put on N95s and everything. Was expecting to see some granulomas, but
was it lung, Matt? So at the bottom right, is that lung tissue there?
Yeah, there's some lung here.
There's lung. So it's in the lung, yeah. So a necrotic lesion in the lung.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then there's all this necrosis around. Some scar and anthracosis. And then there's these abnormal structures around, intermix around these tissue folds.
Is there any more of that we can look at, or is that the best?
This is the best.
That's the best look we get.
Are you talking to the surgeon? Is this the only thing you are going to send us?
It's much harder when the surgeon is right there sitting next to you, you know, while you're looking at it.
Breathing down your neck.
It's really, there's pressure.
I cut some deeper levels into it, and there was a little bit more of this stuff. I'll tell you. Okay, so do we have to call it at this point? Yeah, the surgeon's saying, oh, they're running late in the OR. They need to know that the next case is going to get canceled unless we tell them ASAP.
Give me a second to write this, man.
Sure.
Is it a long diagnosis, Sanjay?
It's long. Ready?
Not me.
What did he say?
I have malignancy, squamous cell carcinoma concerned. Atypical suspicious for carcinoma, deferred permanent. Yeah, I'm kind of something like in the same lines.
My handwriting is horrible. It's malignant something.
Yes, yes.
We're all worried about it in one way or the other.
Yeah, yes. and that's exactly where we were too. And it ended up being malignant. Interesting, it actually was an adenocarcinoma.
Yeah.
So
some glands.
Yeah, it actually looked, when I first looked at it, I agree, it was exactly with you, Raghav, that I thought it was squamous. But actually, some of them are actually these poorly formed glands that are a little bit smaller and just have some frozen section artifact. That had just gotten very necrotic around it. And so to me, it was it's interesting because if these little glands weren't here, right?
Yeah.
You likely would have just called it a necrotic.
Yeah.
Nodule, right?
Actually, my reflex, Matt, is to assume that a necrotic lesion in the lung is a necrotizing granuloma.
Yeah.
So that's my first thought. I look for the rim and I'm thinking it's a necrotizing granuloma. Yeah,
me too. When I got the slides, I was hunting around this edge of this, looking for the granulomas, and ready to tell them necrotizing granulomatous inflammation.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that around this area of necrosis. Yeah. And then looking in the scar, there's these infiltrating clusters.
And also next to infarcts, sometimes there are some funny looking areas. So I would be really scared to sign out malignancy again in this process. Yeah. I didn't want to be a coward like in the previous one, but if it had been my case, I would have been really reluctant to say malignant with such a big lesion and so few malignant glands and so.
Yeah. I was also a coward, and I cut deeper levels.
Man's wise man.
Yeah.
Right? One man says he's a coward. The other man says you are wise to be careful.
Yeah.
One man says he's brave and makes lots of. The other says he's a cowboy. So it's all threshold things. I don't think there's any good answer here. It's just
the surgeons prefer. I've learned that the surgeons prefer that we make the mistake. That I learned. It's like someone at some point told me, like, if you say it's malignant and we remove the lobe because we could do it, we don't have to do anything else. But if you said, oh, atypia suspicious but not conclusive, and then they have to do they prefer saying, well, we remove the lobe and it's benignant, don't worry, you are okay. And they prefer this situation. We make the mistake.
Yeah.
It's a tough situation.
This is a challenging frozen section because, first of all, you're lucky enough to get sampling of the smaller structures or the atypical cells, because most of the times when you sample the necrotizing kind of necrosis kind of areas, how many times I've got this atypical surrounding epithelial like structures? Very rarely. Unless it's a small area, then I get a lot of non-neoplastic parenchyma. But obviously this one was a big necrotizing lesion. So I think the word of caution here is it could still be malignant, even though we are thinking inflammatory lesions. And luckily, since you found those atypical cells, and some of them are gland-like structures, but otherwise it's such a difficult distinction to make on frozen section. I would again be at malignancy or malignant neoplasm with lots and lots of necrosis. That's what I would tell to the surgeon, and then hope that I'm correct on the permanent sections.
Yeah. So Matt, what happened after that? Did they go to lobectomy?
No, they just did a wedge.
So then why were they doing it? So you said it was malignant, right? What was your call on the frozen?
Yeah, we called it malignant. There were some other things that happened in the case that guided them to do just a wedge.
Yeah, but it's interesting, right? So it's interesting. Usually we think malignant goes to lobectomy, and stays in, but sometimes the clinical situation dictates something else. Yeah,
and that's often where it's really good to talk with your surgical colleagues, right? Because they understanding the scenario, right, and understanding what this means can often be really helpful in that it can ensure the best patient care, right?
Yeah.
But if it was not going to go for a lobectomy, or it's not going to change the surgical attitude, what's the point of doing the frozen?
Correct.
Again, the other side of the coin is like there's patient comorbidities and then the surgical limitations.
Yes.
For example, sometimes you can't do a lobectomy because of the location of the lesion or the way it is based on the surgeon's point of view.
True, Raghav, but what she's asking is, why freeze it if you're not going to do anything different based on?
Curiosity.
Yes. So Matt, we come back to the curiosity frozen, right? It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. And surgeons are often, we think of it as we've always been taught as pathologists, only do the frozen if it's going to change something intraoperatively, right?
Yeah.
But I think that surgeons have not read the same book as we have. They have a different thing in mind. They're thinking of, how will I talk to the family? What can I tell them now? The patient is anxious. The aunt came from another state and she's waiting outside in the room. They're looking at much more than just what we are looking at. So I think we have to cut them a little bit of slack, sometimes at least. And sometimes just, humor them.
No, I agree completely. And I think it's a conversation, but it's hard to have that conversation when a specimen just shows up, right? And then you're just, if you have a question about it, you're just yelling over the intercom.
Exactly.
Right, which is a challenging communication piece, right? So that's where I think people who are able to go into the ORs or the surgeon can come in and have a discussion. That's often a much more robust and informative way to discuss these cases and to guide it, right? And have those nuanced conversations of, is it truly indicated, right?
Yes.
I think arguing about that over a speakerphone is not.
It doesn't work.
It's just a recipe for disaster, right?
Yes.
So I think that's a more nuanced conversation.
And also in some places you might be in a position to argue, like you were saying, in Canada versus the US versus Europe, the culture might be different. You might be more or less empowered to say no. In some places you just can't say no. You just have to do what you're sent. If they say you do a frozen, you do a frozen. There's some sort. There's an element in pathology of of customer service. Some people see it like that. So the surgeon sees the patient as their customer, and you see the surgeon as your customer. And that culture is different from place to place also, I think.
Yeah, I teach all the third-year med students as they're rotating through surgery. So they come into the department, and we part of it is we show them some frozens, and then we teach them about the indications for it, and then they have to do a quiz at the end, and then we give them a bunch of indications for it, and then they have to answer what is an appropriate indication for frozen section. And we make it very clear the answer is that things that will change intraoperative management, and we put other options like those curiosity type frozens and make it clear that those. So we're starting from the ground up, and our long-term goals is to educate the future.
Yeah, hoping that when they become surgeons, they'll remember what you taught.
Yeah. Sounds great. So Sanjay, I think it's all you now.
All right. So it's all Raghav's fault that I now have to change my case to make it a different case. Wait, let me just pick another one. Give me 1 second, okay?
Yeah, you know what, Sanjay? I was thinking about a metastatic kind of case. And then at the last minute, I said, like, I like this lipidic, because I was telling you about the birds in the morning, right?
Yes.
So I remembered birds on the fence. So I started with lipidic stuff. That's where my poetic stuff came in.
Nothing to do with lipidic is ever easy.
Right.